Hi there, my name is Moray. I am a fashion designer who is obsessed with history. We talk about some of the most famous women of the ancient period on this channel. And today we are covering Cornelia, mother of the Gracchi brothers. Now that the Gracchi brothers are phenomenal. Some call them the world's first socialists. The Gracchi brothers revolutionized the late Roman Republic, and their legacy has been linked to 19th century populist movements. I mean, they really did a lot of good work. They tried to change the status quo in Rome, and they got killed for it. How did Cornelia raise her sons to be so aware of Rome's injustices? Was she the silent power behind the Gracchi? Before we dive into Cornelia's life, we need to ask, who are the Gracchi brothers and why were they so influential? Gaius and Tiberius were so unique for the late Roman Republic. The Gracchi brothers were born to Cornelia Africana, who is the title of this video, and Tiberius Gracchi. And the couple had 12 children, however only 3 lived till adulthood. Tiberius and Gaius, and Sempronia, who was their sister. Sempronia married Scipio Aemilianus, the general who saw the final destruction of Carthage. So let's talk about the 2 brothers, and we'll start with Tiberius. Tiberius is born in 163 BCE. Tiberius began his career in the military, just as many famous men of Rome do, and he served with his brother-in-law, actually, Sempronia's husband. Tiberius served in the brutal stages of the Third Punic War, and he saw so much destruction and pain. Despite Tiberius having a reputation for courage, his brutal experience in this war shaped his perspectives. However, his pivotal moment came in 137 BCE when he served in Spain. This is where Tiberius saw how landowners were not only exploiting slave labor, but they were exploiting farmers out of existence. The farmers, who used to be the backbone of the Roman Republic and were essential to the economy, were now starving and being abused. In 133 BCE, Tiberius is elected tribune of the plebs. He was for the plebeians. His most famous contribution was a land reform bill. This was a bill that controlled how much land the wealthy elites could own. Something we really need in 2025. Tiberius was revolutionary. However, many of the Senate did not take kindly to his plans. Tiberius was so passionate about his reforms, pushed it past the Senate and took it to the plebeian assembly, and this really pissed off the Senate. Octavius tried to veto the bill. Therefore, Marcus Octavius and Tiberius were enemies from that day on in. Tiberius Gracchus was a threat to the status quo and the Roman system. In 132 BCE, Tiberius' opponents had him killed. You see, violence was the way to get justice if you were a wealthy landowner in Rome. And Tiberius and his followers were killed in a riot and thrown in the Tiber River. Tiberius' legacy might have died there and then, you would think. However, he had a brother, Gaius, who also had similar opinions. Gaius, who was born after his brother Tiberius in 154 BCE, had way more ambition than Tiberius. Gaius had to keep low because he knew that his brother's opponents were out to get him. However, he was pretty radical too. Major plans for the landowners. Not only did he believe in land reform, but he also believed in giving grain to the poor. So he was doubling down. What really pissed off the Senate even more, though, is that Gaius wanted to give Roman citizenship to Italy's allies. Gaius's radical policies, way more radical than his brother Tiberius, made him a huge threat. 121 BCE, Gaius and his followers were declared enemy of the state by the Senate. Rather than waiting to be captured, Gaius knew his time was coming near and he committed suicide. Actually, Gaius made it a statement and he committed suicide on Aventine Hill. Following this, thousands of Gaius supporters were slaughtered on the streets. So the two brothers were dead. However, they changed the world. Even today, when many of us are struggling because our governments won't put in renters' reform bills or give enough social security to us. Their sacrifices, to be honest with you, because they lost their lives, gave way to the Roman Republic ending, Julius Caesar's assassination, and Augustus coming in and creating the empire. However, historians argue that they are some of the world's first socialists and social reformers, and you've never seen a system be proposed like this in Rome before. However, we need to discuss their mother and the way their mother raised them, because Cornelia was a matriarch, but she raised her sons to be good and not to take power in the wrong way. She raised them to be actual politicians who wanted to enhance the lives of the citizens of Rome, especially the poor ones. So how did Cornelia do that? So let's discuss Cornelia. Cornelia was the daughter of Scipio Africanus. Scipio Africanus, one of the wealthiest men in Rome, he defeated Hannibal. It's also funny because her mother, Aemila Paula, was a socialite and she was well known for wanting to show off her wealth. Despite her ostentatious mother, Cornelia Africanus is known for her modesty. Some say that she was the ideal Roman woman before the concept of the ideal Roman woman was created, because she was so intelligent and yet subdued. Another note about Cornelia and her legacy. Cornelia is well known to have praise from Cicero. Cicero, my favorite Cicero. Why is that? Well, it's due to Cornelia's nepos, who allegedly have extracts of her writing in his biographies. So Cornelius Nepos, he's a famous Roman biographer, and there are extracts of Cornelia's writing. And writing for a woman in Rome, it wasn't allowed, right? Finding writing of women during that era is so scarce because there are hardly any first person perspectives of women of that time. So let's talk about her writing, which Cicero in his letters to Atticus praised, and he liked the way she wrote. In these letters, Cornelia tells Gaius to prioritize the Republic over his own political ambition of giving to the poor. That's kind of a contrast, you must think. Why did she want that? Well, it's not actually known whether she was writing or whether it was propaganda and Cornelius Nepos had her texts manipulated. Nonetheless, if there is any indication that she was writing, this makes her an outlier and shows her strong will to defy stereotypes and standards of the era and assert her opinion. Women back then should have been seen, not heard. Why are these writings so revolutionary? I find it interesting that despite these writings being so praised by historians, she's opposing her son. Hear a perspective like this that challenged her son, who could have had her killed? That's pretty pretty revolutionary and shows that she raised sons that were very forward-thinking. Historians say that they show her strong will, and because women were not meant to write, and it was not the done thing, they say this shows her as being a mother who raised strong sons. Another indicator we have that Cornelia was the one who inspired and raised her sons to be so revolutionary in Rome comes from Plutarch and his parallels. Plutarch's parallels, he states on Cornelia: "These sons Cornelia reared with such scrupulous care that although confessedly no other Romans were so well endowed by nature, they were thought to owe their virtues more to education than to nature." So when Plutarch talks about Cornelia, he discusses how Cornelia raised her sons with such scrupulous care. So maybe that is the reason why they were so revolutionary and socialist. Whilst Cornelia never officially held power, there's more than one source to show that Cornelia not only gave her sons incredible care, but was incredibly forward-thinking and changed the status quo in what it meant to be a matriarch. Therefore, of course, his sons would be raised to do good things. On this channel, all we do is talk about matriarchs who battled their way into power via their sons. However, a lot of those sons were not good people. Whilst in the end, the Gracchi brothers may have been silenced and killed, their opinions and their legacy stands the test of time.